All right, welcome to another episode of the GTM Innovators by 360 Insight. I'm your host, Kyle James. Today, we're diving into AI automation, go to market, all sorts of interesting stuff here with my guest, Nick Zeckets. I'm probably mispronouncing it. I never assume I get anything wrong. Did I get close, Nick?
Nailed it.
Awesome, awesome. And Nick is, gosh, you've done a lot of stuff. Super entrepreneur, founder of your new company. Why don't you maybe it'd be better because you and I have never really met before, even though we work a lot in the same circles. Why don't you
Yeah.
give us the origin story instead of me trying to like fumble through it?
Yeah, happy to. And it's not, I've shared it with people one to one, but I've never really written about it. But I came up, I am a sales guy masquerading as a marketer. And kind of started my career. We are just chatting about this for a minute, but started my professional career at a place called the Corporate Executive Board a million years ago. And we had this incredible content, right? These best practices for C-level executives in various functions like finance and IT and things like that. And and back then there was really no marketing. I mean, marketing was not really a function, and we were a public company, and we had some events type stuff, but really not much. There was no newsletter support, no life cycle.
Yeah.
We weren't doing webinars, but we had all this incredible content, which was our product. And I would go and take that. And my first job was to set sales meetings for my boss. And I would take one of those studies. I would photocopy 3 or 4 pages out of like a 10-page report. I would stand by the fax machine, and fax machines were a thing. And I would fax those 3 or 4 pages to 100 people. And then I would do a mail merge with Outlook to those 100 people, asking them if they wanted the other 7 pages. I worked about 10 hours a week, if we're being really honest. And I was at 400% a goal, basically the minute that made sense to me and I figured that out. And so ever since then, I've always kind of understood the power of content, right? It's always been a leading proposition for me, that and this idea of ABAV, always be adding value, which felt like this really incredible point of connection across sales and marketing. And so I went on to, work in some larger places with some, larger roles and responsibilities, and really kind of got to lead a revenue function for the first time at a division of WPP, after having been at Nielsen and kind of figured out what large enterprise deals look like in that experience. And then started a company. It was kind of like a HubSpot for higher ed, a little bit, called Quadrangle. Started
Nice.
in 2011, was all about content and activating the content across a university enterprise, which was really cool. A place like Georgia Tech produces like 1,000 pieces of content a week, but it's in these departments and these teams and these programs, and nobody knows about any of it. We just grab it and then say, "All right, Kyle, here you go, buddy. Like, this is the best email for you this week. This is the best web page for you." And everything that you'd want to happen that would be good happened, right?
Yeah.
More clicks, more donors, more engagement. And so when we sold that in 2018, we kind of had this epiphany of, God, we spent an exorbitant amount of time building all these features on top, a content management system and email marketing, and oh God, just a ton. And this is way before AI made any of these things reasonably quick to develop. So
Yeah.
it was a huge lift. But the epiphany at the time was, oh my God, I wonder if we could just plug that in as an API into some other big system, and started looking at HubSpot's APIs and Marketo and Salesforce and everybody else. And it was like, oh my God, we could actually build an interest graph off of the API endpoints. We could dynamically create, new properties in these systems. We could populate those properties programmatically with the very best content from across an enterprise. This is way cooler as an approach to making huge ecosystems 15% better than trying to replace an ecosystem. And I know that there are some people who are doing that. And I do think that there's energy for it right now. Kind of we're at that inflection point where I think there's opportunity. But that was really kind of the journey. I've always been a content guy and just always believed that if we've got good stuff, in most scenarios, it's remarkably underutilized. And if you put it to work, it makes everything from demand gen to customer retention better.
Yeah, yeah. So that's kind of what y'all are doing at air traffic control now, right?
Yep.
So I, to me, like, I'm curious. There's two obvious paths we could take in this conversation. Is one, like, you introduced like you were doing automation before anybody even knew it was called automation, and like how y'all are building those automations and delivering unique content to an audience of one now, right?
Hmm.
Or
Hmm.
do you want to talk more about like how you remix and take all this content libraries and like produce interesting snippets with it? Where do you want to go? Like, I think both would be super interesting, and I'm curious, but you probably,
Yeah. I think for me, what is most interesting is kind of like a mix of those where it's kind of modern GTM and where people are going. There's a lot of stuff we don't do that
yeah,
you should be doing as an organization if you're out there trying to sell. And I think it's really kind of cool to think about some of the more exciting things that we're even trying, internally, and that we're seeing our customers start trying, where ATC plays a role, right? But again, we're fundamentally not an end all be all solution, right? If like you don't have HubSpot, I can't help you,
yeah.
right?
You're
And
probably
we
not generating all the content for them either. They still have to have the content.
That's exactly right. And we've got some cool insights to help an organization kind of think about. We have kind of like a SEMrush, but for the people that are in your HubSpot account, right? So rather than going and understanding organic kind of keywords that might generate traffic from anonymous, but maybe useful visitors, we have this other part of the package that goes, well, we know what they're engaging with and what they care about and what you've written about. So here's a gap analysis, right? These are the topics you got to cover in order to shoot your relevancy up, which I also think is remarkably interesting. The volume of effort and the number of like technology companies that are being introduced right now that are super focused on top of funnel. I can't tell you if you talk to a reasonably mature marketing organization, they're not talking about top of funnel.
Why do you
They're
think that
talking
is?
about the middle, dude.
Yeah.
But there's zero innovation right now around the middle, around life cycle, around nurture. And that's really where we actually see most of our use cases. But I think that like overall GTM, there's really interesting things happening. There are things that are working to generate signal. There are things that are working to collect signal. And then there are things that are working to action signal. Right. And I think we do a really nice job on actioning signal, but we don't create it and we don't harvest it. Right. And I think there's so much cool stuff happening all the way through GTM right now. And I
Mhm.
think what's happening for a lot of revenue leaders is their heads are on a swivel, dude, because everything's pitching top of funnel hardcore. And this isn't a knock on like Clay or whatever, but it's like, dude, I don't want to send more emails. Cold.
Yeah.
I really don't want to do that. That's not my problem. I've got 5,000 prospects that have been engaged by us at some point. Like, what do I do about them? And how do I generate more interest? And how do I take care of them? And how do I get them through a funnel? Because they're way more valuable than some cold lead that's, just getting to know us and we're going to spend a fortune just getting into the database. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Oh, so let me ask. This is interesting because I just on the last episode had a conversation with Sherry Otto. We were talking about this, and I'm gonna ask you a similar question, right?
Mm,
Because the way people do attribution, it's either first or last touch, right? So
yeah.
those are easy, right? Like I'm curious, like, do you think the reason there's all this garbage in the middle is because people don't know how to attribute it, or they're just not sophisticated enough? Do you think that's why they just kind of like don't go there?
Um, dude, I think it's for two reasons. One, and again, lots of cool people trying to build lots of really smart software to help with attribution. And I think we are moving into a world where the technology that we now have access to with generative tools, we might actually start to get to truth on
Mm,
attribution. But there is no one who, behind closed doors, and I'm doing it here in public, who actually thinks our history of attribution has actually been useful for anything other than explaining why we're spending the money that we're spending to the CFO.
fair.
I don't believe in it. I just don't. I think it's all nonsense, right? And some of my favorite marketers in B2B talk deeply about brand. How are you supposed to measure that? Dude, give me a
Yeah.
break, right? So, like, what is that for attribution? So much of it is quote unquote dark and what, forget it, right? But I think we're moving into a world where we actually might be able to start measuring it and having real insight. But I think the reason that the middle gets avoided is because it is complex.
Yeah.
It's incredibly challenging, right? Going for a micro campaign or, I've got an audience and I've got a really cool offer or a new product release or whatever, it's such a straight line. And I know that if I hit 1,000 people, great copy, clear targeting, that I'm going to move 10 through to a deal, right?
Hmm.
That's linear. And sure, they're going to consume and be bounced on and off of lots of things during the course of that conversion. And will have in advance probably as well if I'm a reasonably mature brand. But like I know if I hit 1,000 with a proposition that I believe pretty strongly is going to matter to them, I pop 10 out the other side.
Yeah.
Thinking about how to take care of the other 990, I've
Yes.
been there. You're like, oh my God, how much branching logic, segment-based content do we have to produce? This, and I've got one person in life cycle if I'm lucky.
I wonder if anybody actually thinks about it that way, because that's a great way to think about it. Like as a consumer of these emails, like, right? Like I wasn't the 5, 10% of the people that were supposed to convert on this delete. You know what I mean? But like
Mhm.
that's essentially what you're saying when we get those kind of emails. Like this one wasn't for me, delete. Hopefully the next one will be the one that gets me there.
Yep. 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 Or even if I did look like a great prospect for that and I had a sales call for a larger ACV opportunity and it's just timing wasn't right or my
Timing,
boss wasn't on board or crap, we're going through
budget.
some other kind of a business thing, a transaction that's keeping us back. Like, okay, you got all the way to a call. What are you doing for that person? Because if you're not spending more time and effort on them than you are on someone who's not even in your database yet, I think you're failing as a revenue organization.
Yeah.
That's nuts to me. Your market is finite, right? Okay, sure. If you sell something for 15, but if you're Calendly, your market is endlessly large, although on their enterprise product, not so much,
Right.
right? So, like, even there, how are they taking care of all the deals that don't convert, right? Because there's more money there than there is on the deals that haven't even come into some kind of a database positioning. So, I mean, shout out to all the life cycle people who are out there. I feel for them. And I think that they are getting a fraction of the resources that they should be receiving relative to something like demand gen, who also needs the resources that they have. I'm not saying that they should shrink. I'm just saying life cycle needs to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. So talk to me like tips, advice, like how AI can help solve that. What are you thinking? Like, where's the sausage making happening and kind of resolving those problems?
Yeah, I love it. So there are things that we do here at ATC, Natch, right? I'm obviously, biased to some of the things that we do,
Of course.
but I think more like foundationally, we spend a lot of time creating buyer personas, largely on people that we don't know yet. We need to be doing regular, iterative research on the people who are already in our database, right? We need to be mining their LinkedIn posts. We need to be running research on the companies where they work, right? And
Hmm.
we need to be pulling that information into our marketing and sales systems, which there are tools that now do that. That's the kind of use case stuff for a Clay or a Bardine, who I freaking love, right? That stuff is incredible. And it can go right into the CRM, right into your marketing automation system. And that research has a number of opportunities to play out, right? One, you can do meta analysis against that. And if you're not doing meta analysis to understand, there seems to be like a foment of like subject matter interest and change and whatnot within our market.
Yeah.
I don't need to call it, you know, uh, buyer Benny or whatever. Like, I don't need to call it a persona. If I know that people that I've worked hard to get into my database that have some degree of like interest in me,
Hmm.
overwhelmingly starting to talk about a subject. And we're very lucky in that LinkedIn has given us a place if we're selling in B2B, right? they've given us a place to actually go get that information, right? So, I look at tools like Aware that give you incredible capacity to kind of go and just know what's happening with a large list of people that you can just upload, track, what are they talking about, download it, take that big body of knowledge and just drop it into Chat GPT. Be like, what are they talking about? It's just
Yeah.
not that hard, right? But there's just a couple manual steps in there. It's like, what are they talking about? What do they care about? And okay, once you've identified the key themes, tell me what they're specifically saying. This is a $20 solution. Aware is like 50 bucks a month and ChatGPT paid is 20. So 70
20.
bucks in
Yeah.
total.
Yeah.
$70 and I don't know, an hour every other week. And you should absolutely know what the people who are in your funnel who haven't converted, who have shown some interest, that's a list that you have in HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever, are talking about. And just are we in that conversation? Because if we're not, we need to find a way in.
Yeah, I mean, essentially what you're talking about is like building an agent that goes out and does these things for you because it's a data enrichment. And I had conversation a few weeks ago, and I'm curious how this lands with you with John Marcus III, who
Mm,
basically pitched it as AIQL, right? Like, and
cool.
I think the cool thing about this is a person cannot go do this sort of research on hundreds, not even dozens, right? Much less hundreds or thousands of individuals and or companies, but AI can. And it can
Yep.
do it in minutes, hours, half a day. And if it
Yep.
enriches your database. So going to that, like you mentioned kind of buyer personas earlier, I'm curious how many buyer personas do you do? How many say like do you break it down all the way to like a buyer persona of each individual? Or how do you group that and think about that to deliver out the content? Or maybe you
So I'll
don't.
be, yeah, I was just going to say, I'll be real honest. We don't do buyer personas. We know where our budget lives
Yeah.
and we know who's impacted by our existence in an organization. Um, but I think the problem with buyer personas is some of the same stuff that holds the impact of segmentation back, right? It holds the impact of workflows and workflow logic back, right? You start to talk to larger organizations that have multiple products and segments and buyer, and if you go and look at how their like life cycle campaigns are built or their outbound campaigns are built, it is an absolute bowl of spaghetti with a whole bunch of like lines and if this then that statements and everything else. And with greater complexity comes greater risk, right? And it becomes impossible to update, which is why large marketing organizations in particular really struggle to be innovative in marketing because there's so much plumbing
Mm,
that to change one piece has the potential to break dozens of other downstream pieces,
yeah.
right? And so, one of the things that I think is really the big opportunity right now is the ability to at scale understand who humans are, what they care about, and what their organizations are experiencing, right? This stuff is all out there. If you have a
Takes time.
world-class BDR, what are they going to do? They're going to look at the company website. They're going to read up on the company. If it's public, they're going to go through the 10K and the SEC filings. They're going to go look at the person's LinkedIn profile. And if they're really badass, they're going to be like, has Kyle ever been on a podcast? Oh, cripes, he has one. Let me listen
Mm,
to the last couple of those. That's a world-class BDR. And if you're worth 100 grand a year, that actually might be worth the time.
yeah.
But very few companies have that kind of ACV at the person level. So it just doesn't work. And you just don't have that many BDRs that have that skill set. But I think that's where the AI tooling that's out there has this
Yeah.
incredible opportunity to provide value because it can scale that quality of research. And that's where I get back to harvesting signal, right? And so then marketing's job becomes creating signal. If I've harvested and I know what everybody's caring about, and then I can create content, whether it's a webinar or a podcast or a resource or a blog, that really speaks to and adds value to that conversation, now I can actually get intent-based signal because now these people who told me what they care about are engaging what I'm putting out there. We actually have a workflow that we use with Bardeen that when people talk about us, we grab that automatically from LinkedIn. We put them through an ICP filter. Do they, have the technology that matters for us? Do they have enough content for us to be useful, et cetera, et cetera? And then we can automate a follow-up flow to them, right? But
Yeah,
it's that
yeah,
content, that information that really drives, I think, the modern GTM machine. And people are just, they're using it too much for outbound and not enough for listening and then reacting to what they're hearing.
yeah. So it's now I'm going to try to repeat some of this because this is fascinating, but I'm sure it can get complicated for people, and I just try to simplify
Sure.
things as much as I can. But you're destroying the buyer persona, throw it away. We're getting
Mhm.
down into individual, unique cohorts, kind of how we think of synthetic population cohort of one,
Yep.
right? To build that knowledge base about them, you've got all this content. You're not meta tagging it anymore because the AI is smart enough to like understand what it is and make the matches across those between those two to decide there's signal here. You put out a new piece of content, this database of 10,000 people. Here's the 75 that would find that interesting. Let me write up a unique way to introduce it to them based on how they like to be communicated.
Straight up. Straight up. Straight up. I mean, that's the future, right? And we're kind of living in that future now. I mean, I think the thing that's really interesting to me, people will knock a lot of the like MarTech, sales tech startups as just a chat GPT wrapper.
Hmm.
I'm one of them. I consistently I'm like, who cares? Like this is just I could just throw that in as a prompt into Chat GPT. I don't need to go buy that tool to do
Yeah,
that.
right.
Where I think they are adding value is when they're building workflows against it.
Yes.
Right. So I look at like a Copy.ai, and those guys are out there saying we are kind of infinitely capable, or writer is the same thing, right? We're infinitely capable from a generative AI standpoint, but this is not just us throwing a piece of software over the fence and then saying, good luck. We're going to map your value continuum end to end. And we
Yeah.
have the tooling, right, that allows you to stitch all that together with an LLM. And Zapier is kind of like trying to do more and more of that, right? But I think it's the workflows, it's the business intelligence of stitching all this stuff together is where almost all of the really exciting innovation is at this point, the app layer,
Right.
right? Because we've kind of commoditized. We're like racing to the bottom now on these LLM models. They're improving at an incredible rate and they're getting
They are.
cheaper at an incredible rate. But if you just hand Chat GPT to an enterprise, they're like, okay, cool, this is fun to play with. And I was like able to help my kid with his math homework, but now what?
Yeah.
Right? Like, how do I solve a real business problem? And I love tools that solve specific ones. Like Laudable just got acquired this most recent week, and their entire thing was, if you have a conversation with a customer and it went well, we will turn that into a case study.
Yeah.
Super discreet, incredibly discreet use case that you absolutely could have manifested with, a couple of days of effort in your own Chat GPT instance. But they didn't have to. You could just pick up Laudable and then be able to deploy that, and then you had that part of your content problem solved.
Yeah.
But Copy.ai comes in and says, we're going to go end to end, dude. Right? Writer comes in, we're going to go end to end, right? And build out the entire continuum of operations with a lot of the cogs being LLMs, right? And then get you to a whole bunch of really powerful business outcomes. And that to me is what's so exciting. And it builds on what you were saying before of that's how you get down to the person level.
Mhm.
But you still need process.
Yeah.
You still need workflows. Like this doesn't just like magically happen because you
Right.
got a Claude account.
You just have a lot less rigid, duct tape together workflows because some of these gray areas you can handle a LLM to handle it. Like figure out the right thing here.
That's right. That's right. I don't have to create 12 branches that, by the way, I've guessed at as a human
Yeah.
and then categorize people into 12 branches of a workflow, right? I'm just telling the LLM we have these 6 different propositions. we have these five different features, and we know all these things about Kyle.
Yeah.
Uh, That today, taking the Kyle piece off, that's 30 different propositional roadmaps in the workflow.
Very true. Very true.
Now it's 30 propositional roadmaps with contextual relevance for the specific human, all taken care of at the LLM level,
Yeah.
right? Like this is where I think all of marketing and sales is getting so exciting. It's like, dude, we were never good at this. We were never good at the 12, 30, 70 propositional workflow branches. Like
Right.
humans are fundamentally terrible at it because we can't process that volume of data. We pretend we can, we just can't. But an
Right.
LLM, perfect use case.
So let's go there because that's kind of where my head's going too. Is like, how do you measure it? Do you even need to measure it? Because if the LLM can kind of get open rates or get conversion rates on some basic steps throughout here, it's obviously going to be constantly optimizing based on the feedback loops there. But how do you, as a manager of this thing, like, does it really just become a gray box that you don't know what's going on, or like that? That's
Yeah.
wild, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that question. Here's my deal. I think the source material is more important than it's ever been, right? You talk about an LLM, it can only do as well as you have helped it to understand its job
Yeah.
and its environment and the people that it's going to touch.
100%. I tell people all the time, like, they don't understand prompt writing. Like, can you write a good scope of work? Then you're an excellent prompt engineer. That's what it
Mhm.
is. Like, if you could give it detail, give it good content to pull from, it will
Yep.
do a great job at the thing. But if you don't know exactly what you want it to do, garbage in, garbage out.
Dude, 100%. And this is why I think, there's all these like SEO content shops. Like, we're going to automate, with generative AI, the SEO value of your cut. Dude, who cares?
Yeah.
Like, I don't care. I don't care because here's the thing. Access to my buyers has been completely commoditized. I can get the email address of anybody on the planet that I want. And I know before I ask for that email address if they're even potentially interesting to me. Like
Hmm.
this is I don't that game's that game's over, right? And also the LLM search tools are also making it more difficult to search. But my point is on that, right, that what those people are looking for is incredibly credible, unique, quality content.
Hmm.
I think the mandate around humans inside the enterprise being able to listen at scale and understand what's important and then be able to turn around and produce something powerful, right? That then gets fed into all those LLM workflows. That to me is where I think a lot of marketing's time is going to be shifting,
Interesting.
right? For the most successful marketing organizations, they're going to figure out the machinery, but that machinery demands unique, credible inputs. And if you've been writing all your content to generate organic search traffic, but not really around conversion, I have bad news for you. Your 600 blog posts are not going to be very useful in the new world of conversion.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's 400 other articles similar to that that's generic and doesn't
Yeah,
target your value proposition, the thing that you
that's right.
specifically solve. It's just top of the
That's right.
funnel content.
That's right. Right. Get to the middle. I think product marketers are going to be more important than ever.
Yeah.
I think the days of outsourcing a lot of your content production, I think it's going to shift and it should shift back in house, right? I look at one of our customers is Speckit, and these guys have phenomenal content. And they've got lots of different formats and types, and their content leader, she is brilliant and doing a bunch of really cool stuff. And she was just talking to me recently about some of the new content like formats that they're introducing soon. I mean, they are so cool. Like I love seeing when companies introduce things like courses, right? And
Mm,
like super detailed playbooks, right? It's like those things don't exist anywhere else on the internet, right? It's why I
right.
love when companies have podcasts. Right? It's like that conversation, this conversation we are having right now has never happened before and it will never happen again. This is
Yeah.
the only time, right? And so, but the derivative value of stuff like this, if you truly invest in it, is like 1,000x,
Yeah.
right? So where should we be spending our time? Sending out a whole bunch of like briefs for, garbage SEO articles, or pulling more of our resources internally around this mandate to have truly differentiated content that feeds all this machinery. And I think it's number two for sure. Like, I don't even think there's an argument that anybody should be having about this, but it does demand that some uncomfortable things are going to happen across revenue organizations.
It's fascinating. And let me pitch this because this is product person in me thinking about this. Like there are tools out there, Gong, Read AI. There's how many different Fathom? There's so many different transcript, record calls like this, turn into
Totally.
transcript. That content, that data is being produced at scale, 100 hours a day for any decent sized company, right? It's
Yep.
just something to bring it all together and say, and a marketer in this example, what are the 10 most important pain points that somebody discussed on a call this week? Spit it out. All right, write that, create amazing content. There you go. Like
Yep.
it seems like that workflow's not that hard anymore.
Mhm.
To your point, how do you listen at scale? This thing's listening at scale. You just have to get good at asking it the right questions to surface up the right things. And then if you want to, check it with a handful of your reps, like, hey, are these the right things? They're going to tell you. But then, interestingly enough, it seems like that probably also breaks down some silos and the marketing sales tension because you're collaborating again.
And also across CS, right? I mean,
True.
like the marketing, because it is a scale operation, doesn't actually get to have that many conversations with the market directly. And they
Hmm.
kind of pretend to, on some kind of a cadence, they'll do a handful of customer calls,
Yeah.
right? And then they'll come back and they'll revise their persona definitions and then back to the mill, right? And that's not a knock on marketing. As a marketer, that is not a knock on us. It just is kind of our mandate has been very volumetric,
In
right? So we
reality,
don't
yeah.
have time. And I think it's really fascinating when you look at like a Gong. Gong arguably should be, playing one of the most critical roles for any marketing organization that is a customer of that tooling on the sales side of the house. I think there's a lot of sales tooling that has an incredible opportunity to impact everything from cold demand all the way through to customer retention,
Yeah.
right? And all those customer calls, oh my God, this is how I'm using it. This is the proposition. These are the problems that we're dealing with. Like, why do we,
Same for
the
product teams, right? Like there's no reason
totally
product teams don't get all the same value. And maybe that's to your point where this product
100%.
marketer is what comes out of this morph
Yeah,
of
man.
like you're writing the content because you're listening to the customer that's also writing the user story that engineers to go build. Like
Exactly.
that's that makes a lot of sense. We're seeing where does the product marketer sit, right? And there are strong opinions both ways about that. And maybe this is whoa. All right, we just went there. A combination of how product and marketing becomes the same thing.
Yep. 100%, right? I mean, and what else are we building for other than market demand?
Yeah.
So, and I believe that to be deeply true. And I love the call out that it has an incredible impact on product. We have in our long-term roadmap to actually have some functionality that serves the product organization directly, right? But based off of these exact same things, right? Like we have a partnership with the guys over at AirCall. AirCall has awesome, real-time SDR transcripts that come right back.
Hmm.
And what's really cool about that is that if you take that information in and you pull it into an ATC that's connected to HubSpot, that's connected to all your content, you can have a follow-up email automatically drafted for the BDR with your best case study and your best webinar,
Totally.
and using the transcript to provide with an LLM prompt the context as to what, like, hey, Kyle, glad I was able to catch you on the phone. I mentioned I would follow up with a couple of things that would be helpful based upon you having said X, Y, and Z. Here's a case study, quick summary. Here's a webinar, quick summary. I'll follow back up in a week. That is truly world-class SDR behavior, and it requires, in most organizations that aren't selling in truly enterprise six-figure plus deals, too much work to ever occur. We
Yeah.
are now living in a world where that is automatic. right? But it demands that the case studies exist and the webinars have happened,
Yeah.
right? So it gets me back to my same point as I had before. You want your SDRs to be super relevant. You want your AEs to be able to crush and close everything all the way through the funnel and have a high conversion rate. You need to give them the assets to make that possible. Otherwise, they're reinventing the wheel for 10 hours a day, which is insanity to me. So, what scales the most? It's the content.
Yeah.
And
Content's still
absent the
king.
content, the other tooling doesn't scale either, by the way.
Yeah. Content is still king, but the kind of content that we need to create is going to be changing back to business focused, product focused, company focused. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Customer problem focused too, right? It like doesn't even necessarily have to pitch. It just has to be unique and it has to be relevant.
Yeah.
Like truly useful, right? And then everything else comes out of it from there. But I just in a world where we do have these generative AI tools and they're getting deeper and smarter and better workflows, the one thing that is going to hold every revenue organization back is the quality of the inputs. Because now everyone can automate the same synthetic research that you can.
Sure.
I know your site activity. I know what you said in public. I know this, that, and the other thing. What do I have to say? Because if your answer is, I'm going to use an LLM to spin tax 2.0 my way to relevancy in the inbox, you are already losing.
Yeah. So, all right. We've already got a great. I mean, this has been fantastic. Well, let me kind of ask you one final tough question because we've covered a
Yeah.
lot, and we've covered a lot of like what can be and what is becoming. But what do you see coming around the corner? AI, go to market, personalization, data analytics that maybe we haven't talked about. Maybe you wish, or maybe like because you guys are building or something. Like, what is the next big thing?
Yeah. Yeah. So I will say that the thing that I am most interested in watching right now are the folks that are building systems that are poised to take on Marketo and HubSpot and Marketing Cloud and those types of tools that are AI native. They're not quite out there yet. They're a little bit out there. They're starting to exist. There are some that are not yet that, but they will become that,
Yeah,
right? You look at, tools like Tofu, they're doing site personalization, they're doing all kinds of cool analytical stuff. Like they've got this really interesting end-to-end set of features, but they don't send emails. They don't have a CMS, right? They're not a
right.
marketing automation system, but like that stuff's pretty commoditized, right? You don't have to squint very hard to go, like that might be a complete system, right? You got guys like John Miller, who's been out there, who was one of the co-founders on Marketo and founded Engagio, and he's been out on LinkedIn talking a lot lately about what he sees the future looking like. He is describing the end of days for Marketo,
Hmm.
a difficult to use platform that has no true AI functionality whatsoever, and saying, if we reimagine everything from the ground up, this should all work very, very differently. We should take humans out of making
Yeah,
high volume data based decisions and get them back to doing human things like having customer
content.
calls, interviewing, talking, building, creating truly unique things, which will be enabled by AI for sure,
Sure,
right?
sure.
But that to me is where that to me is like I don't think people are really getting how foundational a shift these AI native tools are going to be. Not, outreach adding AI. I mean things that didn't even exist until 12 months ago or don't even yet exist that are
Yeah,
starting day one, with that feature functionality built right in to the DNA.
100%. 100%. Wow. Wow, Nick, this has been a fantastic conversation. Super insightful. I'm sure our audience will probably need to go listen to it twice to kind of absorb everything that we've talked about here. So let me kind of ask you here to kind of pitch, like how can people find you? How can people help you? Give us kind of the pitch on your company, what you guys are doing more deeply so that, you know, people like, okay, this guy knows what he's talking about. What is he doing? I want to be a part of it.
Yeah, yeah, happy to. I love LinkedIn. I'm there all the time and post quite often. Please come find me. So Nick Zeckets, Zeckets. I'm only one of two on planet Earth, other than my son, who's 12 and doesn't have a LinkedIn
You're
account yet.
lucky. There's a lot of Kyle Jameses. I wish I was that lucky.
Yeah. Well, you say that. My name has been misspelled, and I've been at the end of the alphabet my whole life. So,
Oh, say the
that's
best for last, right?
yeah. Well, you know what, buddy? I appreciate that. But also last to the water fountain in third grade. You know what I mean? That kind of crap.
Yeah,
So, um, and air traffic control, right? I mean, we're a relevance engine. I'm obsessed with content relevance. And so what we do is right now, we only integrate to HubSpot. It's the only map that we're concerned with. When we do so, we look at all the engagement data, build an interest graph, pull in all of the company's content, figure out the very best of all of it for every individual, stick it right back into HubSpot as custom properties so that when you build email templates and landing pages and chatbot responses, Kyle's going to get what he should get, Nick's going to get what he should get, et cetera, et cetera. So you can really automate relevance at scale with those content assets, which is a lot of why I kind of have the energy and the heart around that idea that we need to be creating better, more higher quality content. Because I can't tell you how many times we've worked with a new customer and they've gone, well, I don't really know if I want to recommend that.
yeah,
Then take it off your website. If you
yeah.
would proactively share a piece of content on your website with someone, get rid of it. I don't care what the SEO impact is. Those are metrics that don't matter anymore,
That's a
right?
pro tip right there.
Totally. Totally. I say it all the time. And it's like people just don't have the bandwidth or the time to take stuff down, but they really ought to.
Nice. And it's airtrafficcontrol.io, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Awesome. So thanks everybody for joining. I hope that everybody got something out of this that you can go really chew on. We'll be back next week for another Go to Market Innovators. And until then, everybody keep growing.